Welcome to the deep dive, where we take your sources, dive deep, and really pull out the essential insights.
Today, we're getting into something pretty profound. Consciousness self-discovery.
Yeah, and this specific concept called the witness, we're using some really rich material here, focusing on the teachings of the Indian sage, Sri Ramana Maharshi.
A fascinating figure from the 20th century.
Okay, so let's unpack this core idea, the witness. It's not actually new, is it?
No, not at all. It has deep roots in ancient Indian wisdom, the Upanishads specifically.
Right. Our source material kicks off with this beautiful old metaphor from the Mundaka Upanishad, I think. 2 birds on a tree.
That's the one. It's such a powerful image. The source explains one bird is, well, it's busy, eating the fruits of the tree, the sweet ones, the bitter ones.
Experiencing life, basically.
Exactly. That bird represents the individual soul, the jiva. It's caught up in the whole cycle of actions, experiences, the results of those actions, what they call karma phala.
And the second bird, what's it steal?
The second bird, it just looks on, completely still, silent, serene, uninvolved with the eating, the fruits, any of it.
That's the witness.
That represents the eternal self, the Atman, pure consciousness. The witness, yeah.
And the teaching, according to the source, is that freedom moksha happens when that first bird, the busy one, gets tired of the whole up and down cycle.
Right, the endless pleasure and pain.
And it finally looks up, sees the source says, the glory, the majesty of that second bird, the silent one.
And realizes, boom, they aren't 2 separate birds, they're one.
The separation was just an illusion all along.
Precisely. And what's really remarkable, and what our sources really focus on, is how Sri Ramana Maharshi, this sage living on the sacred mountain, Arunachala.
South India.
Yes.
Yes.
How he took this ancient, maybe somewhat abstract truth of Advaita Vedanta non-duality and distilled it into something incredibly direct, simple, practical.
So he wasn't like inventing a new philosophy.
No, not at all. He constantly emphasized he wasn't teaching anything new. He was just pointing very directly to the immediate reality of the self that's always here right now. Not somewhere else, not in the future.
Always present.
Ever present. The source highlights how Ramana often bypassed a lot of the complex stuff you sometimes associate with spiritual paths. Intricate rituals, deep scriptural debates, years of preparatory disciplines.
He kind of cut through all that.
He offered a more direct route. His approach, rooted in that ancient truth but expressed with just startling clarity, makes this ultimate reality seem accessible to anyone with sincere earnestness, really, whatever their background.
So it boils down to recognizing and just abiding as that silent, watching awareness.
That's the core of it, yeah.
Okay, so for this deep dive, our mission is clear. We want to really understand this witness concept, Sakshi, in Sanskrit as our sources lay it out. Then we'll dig into Ramana's main practical method for realizing it. That's the self-inquiry technique, Atma Vichara.
The who am I question.
Exactly. We'll look at how his specific approach stacks up against similar ideas in other big yogic traditions, like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras or the Bhagavad Gita.
See the similarities and, maybe more importantly, the differences in emphasis.
And then finally, we touch on something quite subtle, the idea that even this concept of the witness isn't the final destination. There's a truth beyond even that.
Yeah, the ultimate non-dual understanding.
It's really a journey into the core of who you fundamentally are.
And maybe just pause for a second and think about your own experience. Have you ever had those moments where you feel like you're observing yourself? Maybe you're feeling really angry or upset, but some part of you is just watching, noting, I'm angry right now.
Like a slight distance from the emotion.
Exactly. That sense of being the observer, even if it's fleeting or faint, that's the thread we're pulling on today. That's hinting at this witness.
Okay, let's start right there then. This core concept.
Yeah.
The witness. Sakshi. In Advaita Vedanta, what is it fundamentally according to the material we're looking at?
Well, the source describes Sakshi as the pure consciousness. It's foundational. It's non-participating. It doesn't do anything.
Like the ground upon which everything else happened.
Exactly. The unchanging substratum. All our experiences, thoughts, feelings, perceptions, they appear and disappear on this substratum. But the Sakshi itself doesn't change.
And crucially, it's described as self-luminous, right? It doesn't need something else to light it up.
Precisely. It's the light of awareness itself. It's what illumines the mind, the intellect, allows them to function, to perceive, but it's beyond their grasp. The mind can't think about the Sakshi in the way it thinks about objects, because the Sakshi is the very light enabling thought.
It's the awareness, not what you're aware of.
You got it. It doesn't need the mind to be aware. It simply is awareness.
And what kind of experiences appear on this screen of awareness? Just thoughts and feelings, or everything?
The source points specifically to the three major states of consciousness we all cycle through. There's the waking state, Jagrat, then the dreaming state, Svapna, and deep dreamless sleep, Sushupti.
Okay, waking, dreaming, deep sleep.
The Sakshi, the witness, is the constant awareness that persists through all three of those states. That's key.
How so? How does that prove its reality?
Well, think about it. In deep sleep, your body is resting, effectively inert. Your conscious mind, the one thinking thoughts and perceiving the world, seems to shut down. No dreams, no thoughts, nothing.
Right, just blankness, it seems.
But when you wake up, you know you existed through that apparent blankness. You say, I slept well, or I didn't dream, or maybe I was totally out of it. Who is this I that knows it slept, that knows it was unaware of thoughts or the world?
Ah, so something must have been aware of the absence of thoughts.
Exactly. The continuity of that fundamental sense of I am through waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states where the body and the thinking mind undergo radical changes or seem to disappear, that continuity is presented as strong evidence for the Sakshi. It's an awareness independent of those changing layers.
That makes sense. The body changes, the mind changes, but the underlying awareness seems constant.
Mm-hmm. And the source uses that fantastic analogy, the cinema screen.
Yeah, I like that one.
It's a classic in Advaita. Ramana used it often.
Yeah.
Imagine a movie playing. There could be fires, floods, explosions, love scenes, whatever.
All sorts of drama.
Right. But the screen itself, it doesn't get burned by the fire or wet from the flood or emotionally involved in the romance. It remains completely untouched, unchanged. Yet without the screen, there's no movie. It's the essential background.
So the Sakshi is like that screen. Our life is the movie, all the joys, sorrows, thoughts, feelings, everything.
The whole phenomenal show.
And the Sakshi is the awareness upon which it all plays out, but it's never actually affected by it.
Exactly. The source is clear. The Sakshi, which is the Atman, your true self, remains utterly untouched, unmodified by the mental or worldly drama. The life movie happens on the screen of awareness, but the screen isn't stained or changed. It just is, illumining everything impartially.
You know, thinking about watching a movie really helps clarify this. You can get totally caught up in it, feel the emotions.
Sure, you identify with the characters, feel the suspense.
But deep down, there's always a part of you that knows, this is a movie. I'm sitting here watching it. That knowing part, that space. That's like a hint of the witness.
He's pointing in that direction, yes.
Yeah.
That simple awareness of watching.
Okay, so this idea of an untouched, constant awareness sounds, well, very appealing. But how do we actually connect with it? How do we be it? Ramana's suggestion here was quite radical, wasn't it? Almost backwards from what you might expect.
Absolutely. His core teaching involved a fundamental shift in identification. Normally, we identify with the contents of our awareness. I am this body, I am these thoughts, I am my memories, I am my feelings.
That's just automatic, isn't it?
It's the default mode. Ramana urged seekers to stop doing that.
Yeah.
Instead, simply recognize and abide as awareness itself. Shift the focus from what you are aware of to the awareness itself.
And crucially, he wasn't saying you need to achieve this awareness or become it through effort.
No, that's the revolutionary part. He insisted you already are this awareness.
You are awareness itself.
Exactly. The source quotes him famously. You are awareness. Awareness is another name for you. Since you are awareness, there is no need to attain or cultivate it.
So what do you need to do then?
All that you have to do is to give up being aware of other things, that is, of the not self.
Wow. So the practice isn't gaining something, it's letting go of identifying with everything else.
Precisely. It's a profound shift from doing to being. The spiritual work isn't meditating on the self as an object. We're trying to build some enlightened state. It's about withdrawing attention from the not self, everything that comes and goes, everything that isn't the fundamental awareness.
It's about relaxing into what's already here.
Yes. So the ultimate instruction, condensed right down, is simply be as you are.
Be as you are.
Yes. Ramana explained the mind is basically just a bundle of thoughts, with the I thought as the root. When the mind's energy, which constantly flows outwards towards objects and thoughts, when that outward flow is checked, and the mind turns inwards to see its own source,
Then what's left?
the self alone remains, revealed in its natural state. The coverings, the mental activity just fall away, and the inherent reality shines.
And he distilled this even further, right? Just 2 words.
Be still.
Be still.
But the source clarifies this isn't a forced stillness, like gritting your teeth and trying to suppress thoughts. It's the natural stillness that's revealed when the mind stops its restless searching outside itself. When that outward seeking stops, the inner stillness, which is the self, is just there, effortlessly.
That's quite a reframe. Imagine if your ultimate spiritual goal wasn't some far-off peak you have to climb, but just realizing what you already are right now, just by turning attention inwards and letting go of the noise.
It changes everything, doesn't it?
It really does.
Right.
But okay, let's tackle a potential misunderstanding. Words like witness, observer, detachment. They can sound a bit cold, maybe, a bit sterile or disconnected, like you're just supposed to be this passive, uncaring observer floating above life. Is that the picture Ramana painted?
Absolutely not. The source material is very strong on this point. That's a common misinterpretation, but it's fundamentally incorrect regarding Ramana's teaching. The witness, for him, wasn't cold or barren at all. It's synonymous with Sat Chidananda.
Which means?
Existence, consciousness, bliss.
Bliss. So it's not just seeing, it's inherently joyful.
Yeah.
Happy.
Yes, profoundly so. The source describes this state not with clinical detachment, but with words full of warmth and vitality. It's called a luminous, smiling presence. His own eyes were described as like clear, edgeless mirrors, radiating the peace of the self.
An ocean of compassion.
Exactly. A state where existence itself feels like a hymn of gratitude, love, and joy. The detachment isn't from feeling, it's detachment from the suffering caused by identifying with the limited mind. What's revealed underneath is bliss.
That's a totally different feeling. Not cold observation, but warm, radiant presence.
Absolutely. The source describes this underlying awareness, the witness, as invisible but undeniable, self-luminous, self-evident, intimate, nameless, formless. It's closer to you than anything else.
More intimate than your own thoughts.
Yes. And while witness might sound passive, the language used suggests something active, a principle of revelation. This awareness isn't just a blank screen. It's described as luminous, a radiance, sometimes even like a fire of self-knowledge.
A fire, like it burns something away.
It dissolves the darkness of the ego, yes. Abiding as the witness isn't about passively watching thoughts drift by. It's about applying a purifying power of this self-awareness directly to the root of ignorance, the ego sense itself.
So it's an active turning away from thoughts towards the self, not just watching the thoughts.
That distinction is absolutely crucial in Ramana's teaching, as emphasized by the source. It's an active application of awareness to dissolve the source of thought, not passive observation of the thoughts themselves.
This really changes the perspective on practice. It's not grim duty, but discovering this inherent bliss, this powerful transforming light within that actually purifies things.
Precisely.
Okay, so we understand a witness is this luminous, blissful awareness we already are. But how do we actually abide as it? We mentioned self-inquiry, Atma Vichara. What's the core tool here?
The core tool is the question, who am I? Nanyar and Tamil. And the source is crystal clear on this. It's a major point of potential confusion.
Yeah.
This is not an intellectual question. You're not looking for a verbal answer like, I am consciousness or I am John Doe.
So it's not about defining yourself or finding a new label.
Not at all. Its only purpose is to reverse the mind's habitual outward flow. Normally, our attention goes out to objects, thoughts, feelings, this, that, them. The question, who am I, is designed to turn the attention 180 degrees inward.
Towards what?
Towards the source of the mind itself, to investigate the very subject, the I, that feels like it's perceiving and thinking. Who is this I? Where does it come from? And the ultimate function, as a quote in the source puts it beautifully, isn't finding an answer to the question, but to dissolve the questioner.
Dissolve the questioner. Wow, that sounds pretty radical. Does it mean the ego just vanishes?
Yes. The source explains that the root of all mental activity, the first thought, the foundation of our sense of being a separate person, is the primary I thought.
The feeling of I am this person.
Right. By using this very I thought, this sense of self, to intensely investigate itself, to search for its own source, you're essentially pulling the rug out from under it. You use the ego's own energy to dismantle the ego.
The source had that analogy about the stick stirring the funeral pyre.
Yeah, that's Ramana's own analogy. He compared the who am I inquiry to the stick used to stir a cremation fire. The stick helps burn up all the other logs, the other thoughts, desires, attachments, all the mental clutter.
Right.
But once all the other logs are consumed by the fire being the self, awareness what happens to the stick.
Get burned up too.
Exactly. The thought, who am I, destroys all other thoughts, and finally it destroys itself, vanishing back into the silent, luminous self, its source. Nothing is left but the self.
That's a powerful image. Using the tool of inquiry, which is itself a thought, to dismantle the whole structure of the suffering ego, and then the tool disappears too, leaving just peace, being. But how does it work practically, step by step? Say a thought pops up, I need to call my friend. What do I do with the inquiry then, according to the source?
Okay, the source lays out a very clear, systematic method. It's about tracing the ego sense back whenever it tries to attach to an object.
So walk us through it. That thought arises. Call my friend. First step.
First, intercept the thought. The moment any thought, feeling, sensation arises, doesn't matter what it is, you don't follow it. Don't get lost in the story. Oh, I wonder if she's free. Don't analyze it. Why am I thinking this now? Don't judge it. That's an important thought, or that's silly. And definitely don't try to forcibly suppress it.
Just notice it appear. Don't engage with the content.
Exactly. Instead of getting involved with the what of the thought, the immediate action is to ask, to whom have this thought arisen? Yes. The source says this instantly cuts the thought off. Why? Because you withdraw the attention that was feeding it. Thoughts need attention to survive and grow. Asking to whom redirects that attention immediately.
Okay. And when I ask, to whom has this thought arisen? The answer that comes back is always.
Identify the me. Inevitably, the answer is to me.
Right. It arose to me.
This simple recognition is crucial. It gathers the mind's energy. Before, attention might have been scattered on the thought's content, future plans, whatever. Asking to whom brings it all back, focuses it onto that single primal sense of I or me that seems to be the owner or experiencer of the thought.
So attention is off the thought story, and now it's focused on the me who had the thought. What's next? The main event.
The core question. Now, with attention focused on this me, you deploy the core inquiry. Who am I?
Who am I?
Yes. And this directs that concentrated attention keenly towards the source of this me. You're not asking for a description of the me. You're looking intensely for where this feeling of I-ness, this ego identity, actually arises from. What is its root?
You're tracing the I back to its origin point.
Exactly. Looking for the source, not the characteristics.
And if you keep doing this consistently, every time a thought arises, you ask, to whom? Trace it to me. Then inquire, who am I? What happens?
Abiding in the source.
Yeah.
The source says with practice, the mind develops the knack, the skill to stay in its source. Those other thoughts, the ones you keep intercepting, they're starved of attention, so they naturally start to subside. They lose their power.
They just fade out.
Yeah. And the root I thought itself, the ego sense, held steadily in the bright light of the inquiry, who am I, finds it has no real substance, no solid ground. It weakens, its grip loosens, and eventually it dissolves back into the heart, which Ramana described as the source, the self.
Revealing the self that was always there, under the ego.
Yes. The source connects this beautifully to creation in reverse. Scriptures often say reality manifests outwards. Self, I thought, mind, world. Atma Vichara is like yogic decreation.
Unwinding it.
Exactly. To whom pulls intention from the world?
Yeah.
Thoughts. To me, focuses it on the mind. I thought. Who am I? Traces that I thought back to the self. It systematically collapses the whole illusion.
It really paints it as a practical, almost scientific method. Not just vague philosophy, but steps you can actually take to redirect your own attention, explore your own sense of self directly.
It's very practical.
So, the end result of persistent inquiry, the ego, this phantom me, does it actually disappear? Is that what the source claims?
Yes. The source explains that the inquiry stars the ego. Its food is outward attention, identification with things body, mind, world. Ramana called the ego a formless phantom.
A ghost.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It only seems real when it grasps form, when it identifies with something else. I am this body. I am this thought. I am this feeling.
Like a ghost needing to possess something to appear solid.
Good analogy. When you turn around and intensely look for this ego, this I, for the inquiry, who am I, you find nothing substantial. It can't stand the scrutiny. It takes flight, as the source puts it.
And this is called Manonasa.
Manonasa, yes. Destruction of the mind.
That still sounds a bit intense, destruction of the mind. Are we losing our ability to think or function?
No. The source is careful to clarify. It's not annihilation of consciousness or your ability to operate in the world. It's the destruction of the illusory mind, the false ego sense, which is the root cause of suffering. It's removing a painful illusion, not destroying reality. The true mind, the self, remains.
Okay, that's important. It's dissolving the illusion of separation.
And this dissolution of the ego is presented as the direct cause, maybe the only direct cause, for the end of all psychological suffering.
Why? How are they linked?
Because suffering, in this view, stems entirely from the ego's false sense of being separate, limited, and the doer of actions. I did this wrong. I need that to be happy. I am incomplete. I might fail. All that angst comes from the ego.
So when the ego dissolves...
the suffering tied to it dissolves too. The source says the painful dream of this phenomenal world, the suffering within it, just disappears along with the dreamer, the ego. That's liberation.
Imagine that. The source of your deepest anxieties, your pain, not being some external problem, but just this illusion of a separate self, and that illusion can actually be dissolved.
It's a profoundly hopeful message.
And a key point the source keeps hammering home is how direct Ramana's path is. It seems to skip over a lot of requirements you might find elsewhere.
That's really its defining feature. For someone ready for it, a mature seeker, an adhikari, self-inquiry, Atma Vichara, is presented as the most direct, most efficient way, straight to the root.
More direct than, say, years of breath control or chanting or selfless service.
The source acknowledges those other paths, pranayama, bhakti, karma yoga, are valuable. They purify the mind, make it calmer, more focused, fit for inquiry. Absolutely.
But they're preparatory.
Often, yes, they prepare the ground. Atma Vichara, though, is framed as a direct assault on the root of ignorance itself, the ego thought. For those capable, it bypasses the need for extensive preliminaries.
And Ramana said something quite radical about this, didn't he? About rules and disciplines.
Yes, the source quotes him saying that for those capable of self-inquiry who have that earnestness to turn inwards, all rules and discipline are unnecessary.
Wow. That is bold, especially compared to traditions with complex codes of conduct and rituals.
It really is. It basically democratizes liberation.
Yeah.
It suggests the ultimate truth isn't locked away behind gates requiring specific rituals, beliefs, or social positions. It's accessible to anyone right now through sincere inward investigation. The focus shifts entirely from external compliance to internal discovery.
What if the deepest truth wasn't guarded by complexity, but was right here, accessible through just looking inward? That's the invitation.
A very direct invitation.
Now, Ramana clearly put a unique emphasis on this witness in the inquiry. But the idea of an observing consciousness isn't totally unique to him, right? How does it show up in, say, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali? How does the source compare them?
Right. In Patanjali's classic Yoga Sutras, the witnessing principle is definitely there. It's called the drashta.
The seer.
The seer. And the whole goal of Patanjali's 8-limbed yoga system is summed up very early on in Sutra 1.3. Then the seer abides in his own essential nature. Tara drashtu sarupe avastanam.
So the goal is for the seer to rest in itself. And this happens after what?
After you achieve the state described in the previous sutra, 1.2, yoga is the stilling of the modifications of the mind. Yoga chittavritti nirodha.
Stilling the mind stuff, the vrittis.
Exactly. Patanjali's framework sees the drashta, the seer, as pure consciousness purusha. But due to ignorance, avidya, this fundamental myth identification.
Seeing wrongly.
Yeah. The purusha appears to identify with the intellect, the buddhi, and all its fluctuations, the vrittis, the thoughts and emotions. The 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi.
Ethics, posture, breath, concentration, meditation. Yeah, the whole system.
Right. That whole systematic path is designed precisely to gradually still those mental modifications, the vrittis. When the vrittis finally cease, or are mastered, the seer is no longer confused with the seen, the mind, and its objects. It rests purely in itself, isolated, free. Kaivalya.
Okay, so following the source here, in Patanjali's system, achieving that state of the witness, the drashta, abiding in its own nature, that's the result of the practice. It comes at the end of the path after mastering the mind.
Yes, that's how the source contrasts it. It's the destination, the culmination of successfully applying the 8 limbs to purify and control the mind. Witnessing is the outcome.
That really highlights a difference. Patanjali is like, build the stable platform first through rigorous practice, still the mind, then the seer is revealed. Ramana seems to be saying, use the inherent reality of the seer now to dissolve the mind directly through inquiry.
It's a difference in approach, definitely. One is step-by-step ascent, the other a more direct dive inwards.
What about the Bhagavad Gita? The source mentions Sakha Bhava. How does that fit in?
In the Gita, the idea of cultivating an attitude of a witness, Sakhavava, comes up mainly in the context of karma yoga, the yoga of action.
So being active in the world, doing your duty, but with this inner witness attitude.
Exactly that. Lord Krishna is teaching Arjuna on the battlefield. He explains that the true self, the Atman, is the eternal, non-doing witness, Sakshi. It doesn't act.
Who acts then?
All actions are performed by the interplay of the 3 gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, the fundamental qualities of nature that make up the body and mind. Nature acts through the individual.
Ah, so it's nature doing the work, not the self.
Right. And the path to liberation through action in the Gita involves realizing this. Realizing, as Krishna says, I do not do anything at all. The wise person sees it's just the senses interacting with objects, the gunas playing with gunas. By maintaining this detached observer attitude, the Sakha Bhava, you see the play unfold without identifying as the doer.
And this allows you to act without getting bound by the results.
Exactly. You can be fully engaged, fulfill your duties skillfully, but remain inwardly free, untouched by success or failure, because you know the self isn't the one acting.
So in the Gita, the witness attitude sounds less like the ultimate state itself and more like a psychological tool, a way of framing your experience while you're engaged in life's activities.
Yes, the source describes it that way. It's a vital tool for non-attachment, for mental purification, used amidst the hustle and bustle of life. It helps you navigate action without creating more karmic knots.
That idea might feel more familiar to many people trying to stay centered and observant while things are happening, like being the calm eye in the storm.
It's a very practical application for daily life.
Okay, so let's recap the comparison. Patanjali, witness state is the goal, achieved after mastering the mind through practice. Gita, witness attitude is a tool used during action for detachment. Then Ramana. What's the unique punchline for Ramana's approach, according to the source?
The source really emphasizes Ramana's genius in this radical reframing. While others present the witness state as a result or an attitude cultivated via other practices, Ramana clips it. He makes abiding as the witness the direct primary practice itself.
So again, not practice to become the witness, but practice by being the witness through inquiry.
Precisely. Patanjali, practice the limbs, then the drashta abides. Gita, act with the witness attitude, Ramana. Use the inquiry, who am I, as a direct attempt to be the witness from the get-go, using its inherent reality to dissolve the ego.
It bypasses the preliminaries in a way.
Yes, it assumes the liberating power is already present as the self, as the witness. You just need to turn attention towards it and away from the not-self. That's the core of his direct path, the Jnana Marga, as the source presents it.
The source had that helpful table summarizing it all.
Yeah, it lays it out nicely. Key term, Sakshatman for Ramana versus Drashta Purusha for Patanjali versus Sakshatatrajna for Gita. Role of witnessing. Direct means path for Ramana versus goal result for Patanjali versus attitude during action for Gita.
Primary practice. Atma Vichara versus Ashtanga Yoga versus Karma Bhaktijina Yoga.
Relationship to ego. Directly dissolves for Ramana versus stills mind's expressions for Patanjali versus detaches from gunas for Gita. And the implication, Liberation, immediately accessible, Ramana versus systematic achievement, Patanjali, versus through right action attitude, Gita.
That really clarifies the different angles. Is the witness something you gain at the end, a tool you use along the way, or the very reality you start from and realize through inquiry? Big difference.
Huge difference in emphasis and practice.
Okay, this concept of the witness, this luminous, blissful awareness we can abide in through inquiry, seems like the cornerstone. But then the Source throws a curveball. It suggests that even this concept, the witness itself, is ultimately transcended, that it's not the final word.
Yes, this is where the teaching dives into the deepest waters of non-duality, Advaita, not two. The Source brings up what's sometimes called the witness problem in pure Advaita.
A problem with the witness concept itself, how it seems so fundamental.
Well, think about the word witness. By definition, doesn't it imply duality?
How so?
For there to be a witness, there has to be something being witnessed, right? A subject who sees and an object that is seen.
Okay, yeah. Witness implies witnesser and witnessed, subject and object.
Exactly. But the ultimate truth of Advaita is non-duality. Advaita, not two. There's only one undivided reality. So any concept that inherently relies on a subject-object split, like witness, cannot be the absolute final truth.
Ah, I see. The very structure of the concept implies a separation that doesn't exist in the ultimate reality.
Precisely. So the Source explains the witness concept is a brilliant pedagogical tool, a stepping stone, a placeholder, like using one thorn to remove another thorn dug into your foot.
Explain the thorn analogy.
The first thorn is the deeply embedded belief, I am this limited body-mind, that causes suffering. You use a second thorn, the concept or thought, I am the witness, separate from the body-mind, to pry out the first thorn. It's a very useful, powerful thought to break that initial identification.
Okay, so the witness idea removes the body-mind idea.
Yes. But once the first thorn is out, what do you do with the second thorn, the one you used to remove it?
You throw it away too. You don't keep it embedded in your foot.
Exactly. Once the primary identification, I am the body-mind, is broken, the concept, I am the witness, has served its purpose. It, too, is discarded, because it still implies a subtle duality.
So the witness concept is incredibly useful, maybe essential for the path, but not the final destination itself.
That's the sophisticated understanding presented. It's a deliberate teaching strategy. Start with a dualistic idea the mind can grasp. You are the witness of your thoughts. Provide a practice based on that inquiry. Then, when the ego dissolves through that practice, reveal that the initial framework was just a tool, collapsing the duality into the absolute non-dual reality. It's not a contradiction, it's a guided dismantling of illusion.
That makes sense. It's like you use a map to get to a city, but once you're in the city living there, you don't keep staring at the map. The map served its purpose.
Good analogy. The witness concept is the map. The reality is the city itself.
Now, building on that, maybe the most startling bit in the Source is where Ramana himself apparently said, quite bluntly, it is wrong to call self the witness.
Yes, the Source highlights this, especially from teachings recorded in works like Guru Vachakokovai. It's an uncompromising statement from the standpoint of the highest realization. In the absolute state, Sahaja Samadhi, the natural state.
What happens then?
There's simply no otherness. There's nothing separate to be witnessed.
Because the ego, the perceiver that created the sense of a separate world, has dissolved.
Exactly. When the ego, the subject who perceives a world of objects as separate from itself, dissolves back into the self, the perceived world, which was relative to that ego, also dissolves as a separate reality.
The dream disappears when the dreamer wakes up.
Precisely. So in that state of absolute oneness, Ramana asks, to what can it the self be a witness? There's nothing else there. The Source explains that calling the self the witness of all is described as a foolish fancy born from ignorance, ajnana, the ignorance being the lingering belief in duality. It implies something else exists apart from the self to be witnessed. The witness concept is valid only from the relative viewpoint of the mind, which creates divisions. In reality, there is only being, one.
Wow! That really flips the script. The very concept we've been building up is so powerful, is shown from the absolute perspective to be a limitation, a pointer that's ultimately left behind.
It's the final step beyond concepts.
Okay, given all this subtlety, the witness as a tool, not the end, and the ultimate non-duality, there's a really critical point of clarification the Source insists on. It seems especially relevant today with how witnessing gets talked about in mindfulness circles and pop spirituality.
Yes, this is vital. And the Source credits direct disciples like Sri Sadhu Om for emphasizing this forcefully to prevent misunderstandings. It needs to be stated very clearly. Sri Ramana Maharshi never advocated the practice of just witnessing thoughts.
Wait, hold on. Isn't that what most people think witnessing meditation is? Sitting there, watching thoughts float by like clouds, observing feelings without judgment.
That is a very common understanding and practice, yes.
Yeah.
But according to the Source, interpreting Ramana's teaching that way is a fundamental mistake. Sri Sadhu Om explains that deliberately attending to or witnessing anything other than the self, whether it's thoughts, feelings, sensations, events, the breath, whatever, is still a form of outward directed attention.
Even if you're trying to be detached while watching them?
Yes, because attention is energy. It nourishes whatever it rests upon. So attending to thoughts, even trying to observe them neutrally, actually feeds those thoughts and strengthens the underlying mental tendencies, the vasanas that produce them.
So watching thoughts actually waters the weeds in a way, giving them the energy of your attention.
That's the perspective presented. Attention is grace, the Source says, quoting Ramana. Whatever it falls upon flourishes. If you direct attention to thoughts, thoughts will flourish. If you direct it to the self will shine forth.
So Ramana's path is the exact opposite of thought watching.
Completely opposite. His path involves turning attention away from all objects, including thoughts, which are mental objects, and directing it solely and exclusively towards the subject, the I, the source of attention itself.
So when a thought arises,
the instruction isn't watch it go by. It's immediately ask, to whom has this thought arisen? Use the thoughts arising as a trigger to instantly turn attention back inwards, towards the self, the source. Cut the thought off by withdrawing attention.
And that idea, the observer is the observed.
The Source clarifies that's only truly non-dual when the self is observing the self. Then observer and observed are one. But if the I, the observer, is watching a thought, the observed, you've just created or reinforced duality. Ramana's inquiry isn't about becoming a better observer of thoughts. It's about dissolving the observer ego by seeking its source.
That is a critical distinction. It could fundamentally change how someone approaches meditation or self-awareness. It's not about watching the mind's contents, but investigating the watcher itself.
A crucial difference in practice and aim.
Wow, okay. This deep dive has really taken us somewhere. From that simple image of two birds, through the nuts and bolts of self-inquiry, comparing it with other paths, and then right to the edge where even the witness concept dissolves into pure non-duality.
It really is a journey presented in the teaching. It starts with the accessible idea of a silent observer, gives a direct method, Atma Vichara, to use that observer's power to dissolve the ego, which is the root of suffering, and then culminates in realizing a state beyond even the observer-observed distinction.
And the core message feels like it's not about striving to become something you're not, but about uncovering, realizing what you've always been.
Exactly. The Source calls it the simple, effortless, natural state sahaja samadhi, realizing your inherent nature, pure, formless, luminous, blissful consciousness. The path is just the removal of the mistaken ideas covering that up.
So, for you listening right now, what does this all boil down to? Maybe it means the deepest truth about yourself is far simpler, far closer, far more immediate than you ever thought possible.
Maybe the way isn't adding more, but letting go.
The Source ends beautifully with Ramana's own words, just summing it all up. I am that I am sums up the whole truth.
And the method.
The method is summed up in the words, be still.
I am that I am, be still. So simple, yet contains everything.
A lot to sit with there. So here's a thought to maybe carry with you, something to mull over based on what we've explored. How might your day-to-day experience of yourself and the world fundamentally shift if you consistently practice turning attention away from the stream of thoughts and feelings and instead directed it towards the very source of that feeling of I? What might change if you investigated the investigator?
A simple question, perhaps, but a profound one to explore within yourself.